Welcome to the Crux of Cardio. I'm Jordan Burgin, Head of Cardiovascular at Crux. In 2024, I very nearly suffered a cardiac arrest due to an underlying illness. It was unexpected and it fundamentally changed how I look at the industry. Since joining Crux, my role has been simple but ambitious in practice: to strengthen the cardiovascular ecosystem by supporting the people building it through talent, through fundraising and through community, helping founders, executive, clinicians and investors connect in ways that genuinely move the needle. We started the Crux of Cardio to spotlight the incredible work happening across the cardiovascular space, the technologies, the teams, the setbacks and the breakthroughs, and most importantly, the very real patient impact behind it all. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, we're back for another episode of the Crux of Cardio, and today we're joined by a very special guest, which is Tarik Paćuka, the CCO or previous TCO of Terumo. And Tarik, I'd love for you to give yourself an introduction.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Crux of Cardio. It's a privilege to be on this podcast and to feature amongst the other previous speakers. Yes, thank you for the introduction. Tarik Paćuka, former Chief Commercial Officer of Terumo Aortic, been in the space for 15 plus years within cardiovascular. Prior to that, I was in pharma for a very brief period of time. And then obviously before pharma, I had my academia. So I'm a lawyer by trade. Then I went to do diagnostic radiography with ultrasound. So 2 universities back to back. And whilst moving into pharma, I then obviously moved to medical devices and also did my MBA there. So thank you for the warm introduction.
No worries at all. So you started out in radiology. What was your plans in your early career? Did you ever see a commercial pathway, or did you think you might be working in the clinical environment?
Yeah, great question. So most of my family are medics. Didn't really want to pursue medicine at that time, so I went to do law. Thoroughly enjoyed law, not to the extent of being a solicitor or a barrister, but I knew that I wanted to still use that in terms of commercial world. Then went into diagnostic radiography with ultrasound. That gave me a lot of aspirations for clinical use. And very early on, I wanted to do corporate, I wanted to do commercial with using the clinical as well as legal background. So it was very early on that I wanted to move into that commercial front end of the company.
Interesting, cool. So started out in pharma. That talk to me about that. What was it like really starting out in that stage before pivoting into medtech?
Yeah, I mean, John, pharma is, you get a lot of capabilities from pharmaceutical companies, whether it's your training, which is very thorough, to the capabilities in terms of using, customer relationship management tools, very advanced way of dealing with customers, whether it's primary care, secondary care. So it's definitely worthwhile doing if you want to become a very polished, accomplished, seasoned executive, whereby you got all of these wonderful analytics and capabilities. So I was very much spoiled from day one, but also gave me a breadth and underpinning that would actually allow me to be more competitive, more, I guess, discipline in terms of how you want to approach the market by understanding its trends, to the point of view actually using, which was at that time quite advanced CRM system in place to understand, the customer adoption pathways, how you're going to move the customer on, what kind of buying signals you'd have, as well as using it with the use of clinical data. So pharma has a special place in my career simply because it gave me rounding that I don't think I would have been as competitive as I have been without that element.
Interesting. And okay. And so how long was you in the pharma space before you pivoted into cardiovascular?
So I did 3 full fiscal years. First one was with Merck, a much smaller outfit. Then I moved to Boehringer Ingelheim, family feel, German, disciplined enterprise, respiratory products, cardiovascular products, mental health products, and obviously co-partnering with likes of Eli Lilly, with Pfizer, but obviously competing with some of the GSKs or what have you. So he was very, very strong outfit from day one, but equally the competitors were if not more competitive, they would definitely give me a run for my money.
Amazing. And then I believe after Burgin, that was when you stepped into Vascutek. Is that correct?
Correct. So I had three opportunities. One of them was to go into wound care or continence, and then I came across a very niched enterprise that obviously was under Terumo's subsidiary called Vascutek, based out of Inchinnan in Glasgow, textile technologies, vascular, cardiac grafts, and very much relating to aneurysmal repair. And that fascinated me because it was very high end, very niched, and that's when I started to enter that medical device sphere.
Okay. And then obviously when you pivot from pharma into medtech, I've spoken with a few operators that have done, it's a completely different space. It operates differently, the speeds are differently. When you first stepped into this medtech cardiovascular space, what do you think were the biggest misconceptions that you faced pretty early on?
Um, I mean, pharma is Jordan is very regulated. At that time, ABHI came in. You couldn't really maneuver around, how to basically engage with the customer. So the first relaxation was coming into MedTech at that time was whereby now it is part of MedTech Alliance and Eucomed, and you can't really do many things. But that time, the rules were easier to navigate around, how you engage with the customer, how you develop that relationship with the customer. So that was an eye opener because again, you go from extremely regulated environment to what would then be not unregulated, but I would say more relaxed. And the second piece is not having that level of infrastructure and capabilities that usually we have under pharmaceuticals, whereby you had from market access teams to health economics teams to really very diverse product management teams that would actually really be cradled around the sales side of things. Whereas within medtech, there was much leaner structures. So you were basically asked to do more with less, which obviously had a lot of benefits when it comes to somebody who wants to learn, who wants to progress, and wants to compete.
Interesting. And so for me, when I look at your background, you've progressed rather quickly. Not many people, start as a territory manager within 15 years in medtech, become the CCO of one of the most recognized brands in cardiovascular. So there must have been a few defining moments on that way, and it'd be good to understand at what points, you realized that you was progressing and there was new developments and that, this was maybe the moonshot that you were going for.
Yeah, it's been a rapid rise. Equally, one that's full of a lot of work, a lot of commitment. So for me, it was getting the right people on board. Right, I had the right mentor, selecting the right people to basically help you, support you, navigate the complexities. With that was Alan Rogers. He was kind of I referred to him as my father at work and obviously retired. Very straight shooter, knew exactly what he wanted, what he didn't want, as well as making me his protege. For that, obviously, a lot of commitment from my side. A lot of days away from home, lots of, pardon the pun, grafting, whereby I would basically engage with customers, engage with the teams, and very much, I guess, lead from the front. So not very much a micromanager, but a macro manager. So I would be always visible. I would be always in the trenches, simply because if I'm going to preach it, I want to obviously exercise that in practice. Second point is trust with the employees. I created a very strong trust with my teams, with my followers, whereby it was very much a family feel. Right. For that, people will be embraced to do and to go beyond what they were actually contracted to do. People would become more and more creative. People become more and more, I guess, they would enjoy what they're doing, right? Rather than just a job. It's not a job. It's actually a commitment. It's a purpose. Thirdly, creating that strategy, that vision, what we all believe in. Why do we come to work? Why are we going to return to work the following day? Okay. How are we going to differentiate? How do we create that brand? So it was multiple elements that we created. Okay. Thereby the team and the staff retention was achieved. I had the right followers. I had the right mentor. The technology was good. the technology was further fine-tuned with the involvement of stakeholders such as customers. So a really deep voice of customer engagements from vascular community, cardiac community, interventional radiologist community. Uh, but I think the most important piece from my point of view was that reliability. Okay, if we promise to the customer, starting with me, that we're going to do it, we are going to do it, providing it was lawful, that providing that we could actually do it. So never over promise and always deliver. Okay. And that reliability basically shine through the entire organization. We would be seen as a company of choice because they can actually innovate, they can actually deliver. They want to actually almost perfect the cardiovascular aortic disease, whereby physicians were listened to, employees were listened to, and the last point was the inclusion of patients. So essentially creating that three-legged stool where patients, clinicians, and a medtech company such as Terumo Aortic were actually working together for the sake of the present and the future in terms of cardiovascular care.
Amazing. I want to go back to Alan quickly. So you mentioned that he was quite important for you. What do you think the biggest lessons you learned from Alan were then?
With Alan is clarity. So always very clear from day one. Okay, define your purpose, define your objective. Okay, so that clear, defined objective and drive. Okay, keep it simple. He would always say to me, "Don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple. Speak the language that everybody understands." Okay, um, make sure you are straight to the point. Okay, it's already complicated. Don't overcomplicate it. Okay, but most important for me was your word matters. If you promised, you deliver, right? So I think 3 or 4 points that continue to be part of me, whereby some people don't like that. Some people don't like the level of directness. Some people don't like the level of I would say simplicity. But what that does, especially in a large company, and now it's evolving further, is it actually becomes responsive. It becomes clear. There is no error for any form of misinterpretation, and that I believe that culture is really important for everybody to be on the first name basis with people, for people to be seen as reliable, as welcoming, open door policy at all times. So I would say things that people, your listeners, would listen to say, well, actually, that's straightforward and that's so simplistic. We tend to, as executives, equally forget the trivial aspects because of the complexities that we face with on a daily basis.
Like that. No, you're absolutely right. In such a complex environment, that simplifying it might actually be the way forward at times. And as you've grown into leadership, and you've went through these different stages because you grew quickly. 15 years you've went from a regional sales manager to a CCO. How many of those lessons and those fundamentals have you managed to maintain? And is there any of the areas that you think have become more difficult to maintain as you went into higher headcount?
No, I would like to think, and obviously the people who work with me might say, well, Tarik, along the way you didn't, but I like to think that I try to stay pure. I try not to change, as in my character, my personality, the way I've been conditioned towards customers, towards associates, towards patients, towards my competitors. So I think, Jordan, as I progressed through every single role, I always retained the original me. Okay, it was really important. Why? Yes, the complexity of the job become more complex. Regions increase, the headcount increase, but I think that the backbone of the company, the backbone of Tarik Paćuka was remained the same, which is very clear, very driven, know what he wants, very much in a servant mentality, wants to support his associates, okay, protect the team, protect the brand at all times, but equally retain that trust with the customer, with the patient. So I would like to think that I've retained all of those positives throughout my tenure at Terumo.
Amazing. And, with these changes of roles, changes of titles, remits, headcount, everything, there's gradually going to be changes with yourself as well. What do you think the biggest adjustments were that you had to make as you took on more responsibility?
Adjustments were more to do with the geographical landscape. So I have obviously, I would be less at home, which obviously there's a compromise. If you're going to be an executive, you need to I guess, put your personal life as a secondary if you're going to win. So that level of commitment, it was 100%. Okay, I was all in. Um, the cultural changes and differences, how people react in United States are going to differ how they react in Latin America and equally in Asia Pacific. So it wasn't one size fits all. So that change in me and that expansion in terms of my personality had to cater for different stakeholders internally and equally also externally for those customers. And thirdly, it's just trying to continue with the routines that you had from day one to basically that they continue to shine through. So we mentioned that trust piece, the reliability piece. So you're now working with three different time zones: Americas, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and Asia Pacific. When somebody's going to bed, somebody's actually waking up. How are you going to retain reliable? How are you going to maintain that level of customer centricity? How are you going to make time for an associate that wants to speak to the CCO? So those elements would have to basically push me to the point whereby I would have to work 24/7, literally. Some people will say to me, do you ever sleep? Right? Because again, Jordan, I gave my word, right? I gave my commitment to the cause. The company, when it was taken over, was doing very little revenue, and now it's doing a lot of revenue. Was taken over, had not many followers. Now it has over 37,000 followers. That digital expansion, the amplification, can only be achieved if you are 100% committed. So I would like to think that people are going to remember me at Terumo as a guy who was committed.
So you spoke. There's a lot to digest there, but there was also a lot to be done. As you mentioned, that do you ever sleep? Those kind of questions. Let's like be quite human about it. How did you feel when it got to that stage? Was there any moments where you thought, okay, I'm actually quite out of my depth here. Do I need to remanage this and change anything? How did you sort of handle this?
Um, I'm a confident person
Yeah.
in heart. I'm not arrogant, confident. I surround myself with the right people who continue to keep me grounded. I have a very good work-life balance from a point of view. My wife, my kids fully understand and make sure that I am actually looked after um, when I'm at home. That helps. That many times executives who have private issues at home, obviously it does cascade into professional life. So I was very fortunate to have that. Equally, I had a very aligned C level around me. Okay. The CEO, Eric, that I worked with, it was a longtime friend, but equally from a chief financial officer, chief people officer, chief of staff, they were all people who I knew extremely well. So that genuinely helps whether you are going into new verticals that you are unaware of, that you have zero knowledge of. If you have the right level of people around you at any point in time from a multidisciplinary point of view, those impacts tend to be less. It's easier to digest, it's easier to navigate around the complexities. But equally, when you do come home from work, if you are surrounded with the right people personally, in your private life, those do have, again, a favorable outcomes in how you turn up to work the following day.
Interesting. And I think one of the things that a lot of executives do struggle with as they get to the scale you did is maintaining that culture. It sounds like you built a phenomenal work hard culture around you. How did you build that and maintain it when you got into those triple figure headcounts? Is when people get past 100, 200 that it becomes quite difficult to do so, especially in an international basis.
Trust, trust that we as a collective are doing the right thing for the customer, for the patient. We play very hard, we party equally. So celebrating wins. Okay. So when we do achieve award, I'm not the one to collect it. Right. Others under my reporting line go and collect it. It's not about me. It's about the team. Okay. Thirdly, what are we trying to achieve? Are we on strategy? Are we off strategy? Do we need to tweak anything? Where is our gap? So continuously asking for that feedback, for that calibration to ensure that people are intellectually stimulated, Okay, drip feeding from an objective point of view, introducing different ways of working, creating webinars, creating third-party inputs in terms of how we're going to sell more effectively, how we're going to market more creatively, how we're going to amplify clinically, are all elements which continue to energize the teams while still you have underlying trust with the team. What is our purpose? There isn't Tarik who's taken all of the credit. Actually, the team wins. So, and most importantly, the patient wins. So, bringing patients to the office, to the factory, sharing their stories through patient days, bringing clinicians and creating our own, so to speak, seminars and webinars and conferences whereby they can talk to the world in terms of how our technologies help them simplify complexities. Jordan, are all elements that ensure that the staff retention is there, that the team is energized, that people continue to contribute. And all of those elements, when you put together, are something that creates a very important stimulus for for a winning mentality.
Incredible. And, with that winning mentality becomes high revenue, high achievements, and high pressure. Um, how did you find that you dealt with pressure?
Pressure is something that each individual basically interprets and how they perceive that pressure to be. So, doing martial arts is a good pressure outlet. Going to the gym before anybody wakes up is another outlet. Doing yoga, okay, being away from work and switching your phone off for a certain period of time, but equally getting the right balance in terms of, okay, guys, we're going to work Monday to Friday. Weekend is for family. Okay, so pressure is suppressed. Okay, only when a clinician calls, there is an emergency, that's when we're going to respond. So please do not send me any emails because I'll send you three back over the weekend. If you are able to create that, the pressure is significantly suppressed and the pressure is only created Monday to Friday, whilst the underlying pressures are, I would say, outletted from a point of view of training, of people doing curriculum activities that are not work related, okay, but equally they still understand the purpose as to why they come to work.
Interesting. I love that. So we've talked a lot about the good. Let's talk about the bad as well. Getting to this stage, it can't have all been rainbows. There's got to have been times when it was pretty difficult, whether it be, internally at the company, the market. What are the sort of biggest challenges you faced in your career?
No, it's not all rosy, right? There's obviously the I would say area to work to improve on side as well. Um, Product recalls have a significant impact, right? We had to recall a couple of products under my tenure. It does create a significant downward spiral effect. You need to obviously then try to provide clarity, try to provide reassurance, try to provide a positive spin for the sake of that needed to be recalled because of the stringent regulatory conditions that we have to abide by. The negatives also, Jordan, is we sometimes fail to recognize the companies that we compete with do not like to give market share away. And these companies are much bigger than Terumo, right? Medtronic, okay, WL Go, okay, Cook Medical, um, Gettinger. So when you when one assesses those elements, right, far too often do executives as well as the front end of the company, they genuinely believe that, taking 2 to 3% market share is gonna be every single year. So forecasting correctly. And what I mean by that is don't try to forecast like you're going to grow 50% next year because the competitors are not also standing still. They're equally innovating, they're equally investing, they're equally acquiring. So as a result of that, uh, there has been throughout the tenure a lot of frustrations whereby the return in terms of revenue is not there by way of shareholder wanted X and the reality is Y. Okay. And thirdly, trying to create, trying to remove glass ceiling. Okay. Trying to create an environment where employees, associates, there isn't just Tarik who's highly driven and who's ambitious and who wants to be the CEO. people around Tarik equally want Tarik's position. So you're being pushed. So as an executive, how are you going to create, right, the next band for, I would say, younger, more talented, very capable team members? Okay. Because if you don't, the likelihood is they're going to leave for another company. So all of that investment, all of that hard work, all of that nurturing has basically been lost as a result of not being able to create the right bandings, the right next environment for those people. So I would say combination of product related, uh, I would say very ambitious forecasting, as well as not creating the right environment for associates to move up the ladder, are all elements whereby there's an element of frustration, there's an element of disappointment, there's an element of, okay, I need to start again. I would say there are less issues and more wins, but I would not be able to say there are no issues.
And out of those three, very crucial points you mentioned, which one would you say kept you up at night the most?
I would say product recalls. With
Yep.
product recall, I've seen that in many times through us as well as direct competitors. Product recalls can actually make a company go from number one to number three overnight. Can also damage the brand, can also knock the confidence in the end user to actually use the complementing portfolio. Um, I would say anything that can affect patients and the clinical outcomes of those patients are things that always kept me up at night. And as a transparent, highly moral person as I am, those elements would continue to be with me as I continue to be within the medtech space.
I want to take a minute to say thank you to our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical device development. With deep scientific and engineering expertise, they help medtech teams crack tough development challenges and make the right calls early, reducing rework, delays, and uncertainty later on. Whether you're navigating uncharted technical territory or racing towards market, TTP brings clarity and real-world judgment to the decisions that shape performance, usability, and manufacturability. By retiring risk early and grounding innovation in real-world constraints, they help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
Interesting. There's going to be people watching this that have probably haven't had to face that yet and hope they never will face that. What's your biggest advice that you would give to someone that may face something like this?
It has to be for the right reasons.
Okay.
Okay. Patients come first. We are servant of the clinical community. We are servant of clinicians and the patients. Clinicians are doing their jobs more effectively through medtech companies, but equally, no harm can be given to the patient. Intentionally, absolutely not. Unintentionally as well. If there are any doubts with anything that a medtech company does by way of conduct, misconduct, by way of wrongly manufacturing, mislabeling, and what have you, the right thing to do is to have the moral to basically make sure that that product is safe and it's sound for many patients today, but also equally for many patients tomorrow.
Great advice. I love that. And hopefully the people watching don't eventually have to fall into that. But, as things scale, you may end up doing so. So definitely use that information. I looked at your resume before this, Tarik, and you ended up with some incredible statistics at Terumo, into the triple digit millions. You was managing a team of 350 plus globally. When you look back at everything, what do you think is the biggest achievement you've got to date?
Um, the amount of patients I was able to indirectly help. Okay. My parents are patients. I'm going to be a patient one day. So the accomplishment for me was being able to have an indirect impact globally. Uh, the amount of people that I managed to help internally in terms of their career progressions, advice, mentoring, supporting, the brand that was created by way of Vascutek formerly and Terumo Aortic went from a very niche player to a mainstream player. That revenue uplift, to 400 plus millions, etc. The amount of talent that was grown under me. I think the overall was being the underdog, right? And many companies much bigger than us never really seeing us as a threat. And fast forward 15 years later, I would say a big threat, and they potentially don't have an answer for that. I think that's the big one where it came from relatively its infancy to something that could potentially be a blockbuster for many years to come.
Blockbuster, to say the least. And in terms of the commercial playbook, then, your growth was very quick. It was very consistent. The numbers were very high. There's got to be a bit of commercial playbook that you've created, and it'd be good if you could share some of the secret sauce that you've got into that.
I would say there is over the years you need to build relationships. Okay, relationships are paramount of importance. Working in a class 3 environment, Jordan, customers need to obtain trust with the company. They are not going to implant products if there is no trust with that leader. I would like to think there was trust and there is trust with me, okay, with the teams around. Um, the other element is I keep on going back to is reliability. Far too often, I think we suppress the importance of being reliable in the marketplace, of actually saying you're going to do it, and importantly, equally importantly, doing it. Okay, um, you need to product launch, you need to innovate. That's a given. You cannot stand still, right? Whether it's with the mechanical devices, whether it's creating a digital ecosystem, whether it's creating something that's differentiating, but equally you need to innovate. There is not a secret sauce per se, but I think that those relationships, that drive, having a sense of purpose, being reliable, innovating are all elements that really create something that has value beyond just a name, and it has value beyond just a device. Okay, that value is when it came up with Terumo Aortic, committed to aortic care. Okay, that word commitment resonates. Okay, and anybody could pull me up on that by saying, Tarik, you're not being committed today. So I had to basically every single day come with an A plan to show that I'm committed. And employees did the same, whether it was manufacturing staff, whether it was VPs, whether it was commercial, whether it was C-level. Everybody, Jordan, had to basically perform and demonstrate commitment. And I love that word, and it does resonate, and it does provide a lot of results, but equally, trust externally, internally is of a paramount importance.
Interesting. And then I think I want to touch on an area now, and it's more, I guess, of personal feel. You've been at Terumo a long time. You've achieved some incredible things. What's next for you? How are you feeling?
I feel good.
Okay.
I'm relatively young. I'm very fortunate to be healthy. For me, Jordan, I still have unfinished business, right, which is to help patients, right? If you don't feel with that purpose in medtech, from my point of view, you shouldn't be here. Um, for me, the future is undefined, and it will be wonderful to somebody to help me define it. Okay, I feel still very committed, very driven. I have, I believe, created a wonderful brand in myself, but equally in the people that served under me, but equally with the customers. So I think if one was to look at all of those elements and line them together, I think that the guy speaking today has a lot more to give. However, today is still undefined. What I would love to do is to have somebody help me define it for the sake of patients, for the sake of shareholders, for the sake of customers, preferably in the cardiovascular arena, because again, this is where I grew up and this is where I belong.
Cool. And let's talk about the cardiovascular arena then. So, like, when you started out, it was 15 years ago, 16 years ago in this space, I can imagine it looked a lot different to what it does now. Um, Firstly, what's the biggest changes that you've seen from start to finish in the career?
Obviously, we had a stint of pandemic, which obviously Bruno was on earlier. So I had the pleasure to work with Bruno during the rods and cones during that pandemic time where many companies had to embrace digital. Okay. But before that, it was the cardiovascular was very much looking at mechanical devices, very much looking at, okay, how do we improve the conventional way of doing things through having stronger clinical data? Where we've seen the last circa years, where we've seen a significant rise of fusion technologies such as SaaS, such as digital influencing technologies to actually help those companies that operate within mechanical devices to go from, okay, well, this is how to further simplify it, okay, by actually making the procedure shorter, more accurate, more clinically beneficial, and equally improving the quality of life for the patients. Introduction of hybrid technologies where patients will not have to be significantly opened up by way of surgically. The combination of fusing multiple technologies together to create a hybrid device has ensured that the patient's recovery times are shorter, the incisions are shorter, the quality of life is not handicapped or wheelchair bound. So we've seen elements of that. I think the biggest transformation that also we've seen is the word minimal invasive. And some of your guests previously have come on to talk about that. I think that's the era that we work in today, right? That minimal invasive whereby the scars are smaller, potentially can't even see them. The results are getting better. Patients that were high risk could only be worked on. Now we're looking at mid-risk as well as low-risk patients or all-inclusive patients. So we've seen, I would say, generational move of technologies go from what it was very much a radical invasive surgery to what is now digitally supported, minimally invasive, and more patient benefit from a point of view of recovery care. That I've seen in the last 15 years. And if that ecosystem by way of creating mechanical devices is supported with external partners who have who work as a subject matter experts, such as rods and cones, if they're able to add that to the ecosystem of a company, that generally does improve the outcomes. It simplifies the procedural times for the patient, but equally also for the operator. And I believe that's the era that will continue to be the one they're in, with a view that robotic surgery would have a significant play in the future.
Interesting. I was going to ask you a question, but I feel like it's a topic that could keep you speaking all day. So I'm going to spare you a little bit. It's clear to see that one of the most important factors for your next move is going to be clinical. It's going to be how much clinical impact you can have. I don't think you'd go anywhere that's going to have minimal clinical impact. There's tons of things that you just mentioned, areas that the world of medtech needs to get better at to give people these better experiences. If you could pick a couple of them, what do you think are most important for you right now or for your next move?
Obviously, you mentioned clinical, so the product has to work, right? A product has to have an impact, okay? Whether it's a significant impact or a minimal impact, that's, I would say, is subjective, right? Depending on which part of the world you're working in, because not every single healthcare system is as developed as the Western world. I would say equally the vision, the mission, the purpose of the company, what they're trying to do. Are they a smaller company looking to enter a more mainstream? Are they a company that are happy to basically do their own thing? Okay. Are they a company who are looking to be acquired in X amount of time? So thereby they want to have basically this amount of influence today and tomorrow, and that's that. Uh, and lastly, what is the shareholders' value, right? What is that shareholder trying to do? Whether it's chairman, whether it's external investors, if they are in it from a longer term point of view, that's a big attraction for any executive medtech personnel coming in. Because again, if there is alignment, there will be a winning mentality. If there are, I would say, misaligned needs and different pulls, it could very easily come crushing down. So for me, product, the aura, vision, mission, purpose of the company, and equally the investor arm, the chairman, the external board, in terms of what their aspirations are.
Interesting. I like the answer. I think we could have kept you all day if we wanted the full capacity of them all. So I wanted to spare you some time. Okay, you're going to be a hot property for a lot of companies. There's going to be a lot of people that could really benefit from someone like yourself. It also means that you're going to have to do or spend a lot of time identifying, smoke and mirrors, working out which companies are actually going to be able to make it and which companies aren't. Ultimately, when you're assessing these, situations, these companies that are going to approach you, what are you going to be looking out for? There's going to be signs that, their commercial engine is not so ready, clinical engines again. What kind of things are you going to be looking at that are going to be red flags?
Regulatory clearance,
Yeah.
first one. Obviously, we are now in this era where medical device regulations are significant barrier. FDA is easier to navigate around than the 510K. Equally, CFDA, the Chinese regulations are complex. PMDA, Japanese. So those are the kind of the big fours, because obviously MDI and the C mark is underpinned. So the company has to have a regulatory pathway, a regulatory strategy. So that's the first, I would say, fundamentals. Okay. Equally, how strong is the commercial engine? Okay. Is the commercial engine whereby actually there's no boots on the ground? What's the operational model? Is it through direct? Is it indirect? So if it's distributor led, how strong are distributors? How in tune are the distributors regards to, are they exclusive? Are they, I've seen over time whereby yes, they exclusive, but actually they're not. And last piece is, what is that customer, that voice of a customer advisory board like? Are they true experts? Do they know their subject matter? Are they diverse? What I mean by that is, are they global? Okay. If those three elements are there, okay, to understand regulations are in place, customers are broad spectrum, and the operating model is X. I think those three elements are really important to understand from my point of view. For me to say, hand on heart, I can actually scale that. I've got the right team to do that. I can do X and Y and Z. If there isn't, it's not a no, but it's trying to then condition the reality with the CEO, with the shareholder to say, well, that can be achieved. However, you need to do X and Y and Z prior to that being achieved.
Okay. I wanted to zoom back in on something that you touched on quite quickly. You mentioned like different business models, commercial models. You've worked across OEM, direct, indirect, pretty much everything, to be quite honest. What areas do people normally get wrong? Is it a hybrid mixture of both of them, either of them, or is there any areas that you think in particular companies tend to get wrong?
I wouldn't say wrong. I would say they are not maximizing, right?
Yeah.
There is not a right or wrong. It's about obviously looking to maximize. So when you have a direct business model, those associates are part of the headcount. So thereby you have a direct influence as a stakeholder over the implementation, over the execution, over the strategy. Okay. And that one of the element is it's easy to maneuver. Indirect with distributor led, if they're exclusive distributors, they'll be with you for a long time. Then they understand, right? Equally, they also need to have that level of subject matter expertism, which is they need to have that level of influence within cardiac, vascular field. They understand the customers. They need to understand what the capabilities there is. I would say on business to consumer, so to speak, direct, indirect, I think where the biggest or lack of maximum effectiveness is the execution element. So far too often do we internally talk about the strategy, do we talk about the campaigns, do we talk about this is how we're going to do it. It's when you actually go in there to engage with the customer, to ask for that level of commitment, that's when it tends to not be 100% recovered, because people are not executing with level of discipline, with level of confidence. They're leaving some form of a room for other companies to go in, etc. So I think that's probably that's a difference in terms of not wrong or right. It's about maximizing those channels and executing with discipline. The business to business, the OEM, is a completely different kettle of fish.
Yep.
You're working with companies who have equally that level of insight in terms of their products and what they want to do. And it's again based on fundamentals such as partnership, such as the trust, such as that reliability, etc. But it does equally require to have strong contracts in place, and requires the right stakeholders to manage those relationships at a higher level, which I used to do with all of those partners. Because when the core team is misfiring or not fulfilling the expectation of one of each other's, that's when the C level would come in, or the senior partners, and they would basically have that level of alignment and then further re-energize the teams to go back into and do it. So I think it's just executing, partnering, and having those levels of reliable working that will basically maximize those channels.
Okay. And how do you pressure test them early on to make sure they are maximizing them?
You can very easily see by way of, are people performing by way of local, regional, I mean regional in terms of country, regional in
Yep.
terms of a continent. Are they hitting the plan? Are they significantly above plan? Are they below plan? Okay. You can also pressure test with customers. I was always well known to speak to customers directly, pick up the phone and say, what has worked, what hasn't worked. I hear you have a problem. I'm going to get involved, etc. Because very easily, Jordan, you can find out if it works, if it doesn't work, does it require modifying? Does it require a further uplift? How we under forecasted it because now people are 20% above plan. Okay. So it does require a partner who is customer facing, who, yes, as a CCO, was the company CCO, but was equally with always with the customers, always with the teams, meaning that I would be faced with reality rather than potential complacency sitting in my glass office.
Of course. Okay. And the big question that I want to ask is, if you could start over again, is there anything that you'd do differently?
I would not do anything differently.
Okay.
The only thing that I would potentially do differently is having a larger influence over the network of people that I have. The rest, I wouldn't change anything, Jordan. I thoroughly enjoyed what I do. I have shown what I can do. I have indirectly touched many patients, which was the outcome for me in terms of helping them and helping that are now called my friends who were customers. And if I had to do it all again, where do you want me to sign?
Well, it looks like you've you need more hours, to be quite honest. It sounds like you've running out of hours doing it. So unless we can figure that part out, I don't think you'll be able to. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's talk about the future then. We mentioned a little bit about the cardiovascular market. Where do you think the biggest opportunities are going to be over the next 5, 10 years?
Cardiovascular market is growing. It's one of the highest growing markets. The patients are living longer, and the technology is improving very, very rapidly. And this fusion that we talk about hybrid, that we talked about SaaS, that we talk about minimally invasive, robotics is coming thick and fast. Um, it has a very strong compound annual growth rate. Okay, so it's the right time for people to invest in. Okay, but equally, it's the right time for medtech companies, established companies, to really increase the speed of their innovation. Okay, because clinicians are very capable. Okay, so I do expect, 5, 10, 15 years from now for there to be standardization. And now I'm using the word standardization by way of, you have an ally, you have a robot that will help you standardize some of these procedures. Okay, it's not going to replace, it's going to enhance something that we've seen with AI. We're going to see a lot more raw data being utilized by way of introduction of AI. Okay, so thereby we should see clinical trials being faster we should see approvals of other company products being granted quicker. Okay, but equally, there is a tendency for one or two companies to basically dictate the marketplace. Okay, and how they do that is through acquisitions. Okay, so I do expect for more M&A deals to go through. And as a result of that, the pipeline is either going to be bought, or equally smaller enterprises are going to be trying to innovate. Okay, as well as I do expect for more partnerships. So not acquisitions or mergers, partnerships where companies, they're essentially in their own right and they exist in their own right, but equally they are working with each other. And we've seen that, within aortic, endovascular, cardiovascular space. So I think the future is very bright, minimally invasive, fueled by AI, digitalization, as well as partnerships and acquisitions.
Interesting. There's a question I often hear people asked, and I actually think it becomes quite subject to how people feel and what they think. And people often ask what's overhyped right now in cardiovascular. I actually have no interest in that. I want to talk about any areas that you think are misunderstood that maybe will be the next hype.
Um, I think again, I'm subjective here. I think that aortic disease is not misunderstood. I think it is suppressed. Okay, and suppressed in regards to how much more investment, innovation is needed. Okay, aorta has been recognized as an organ in the body. Okay, that came from Martin Czerny's group in Freiburg, and still we see that many clinicians are wanting technology. Okay, but equally, not enough companies are innovating quickly to address, aortic root, which we know is an issue. Coming out of the heart, right, that's an issue. So we know that from heart failure point of view, we know that aorta, whether you go from all the way from the root down to the bifurcation to the tips, at any point in time, that aorta is fragile, especially in those patients that are living longer, patients that are having acute or chronic diseases, patients with connective tissue disorders equally. So those pool of patients have become more defined. Okay, so I wouldn't say it's been forgotten. I would say it's been suppressed by terms of the urgency that's needed to basically address it from a minimally invasive point of view, with an aid of robotics, with an aid of digitalization, and most importantly, with an aid of improving patients' quality of life beyond being treated, right? And I think if those elements are recognized, and the sooner they are, the better, then we should see a significant improvement in cardiovascular treatment, full stop. Because once the aorta has been addressed correctly, then we should see that all the lateral illnesses that come from cardiovascular aspects are, I would say, controlled more effectively.
Interested. And if you was an investor today, what markets would you be betting on?
Uh, again, cardiovascular is very broad. I would invest in again, interventional cardiology in terms of TAVIs, making it even more robust, transfemoral, transapical. I would invest into cardiovascular robotics to standardize techniques. I would invest in endovascular in regards to how to treat the aorta with the full endograft system that you build up. Equally, I would invest in therapeutics, whereby it's a combination of pharma and biotech to basically not eliminate the aortic disease, but actually to slow it down. And what I mean by that is you get treated, and here's a set of prescription medicine that's going to basically make sure that your aneurysmal disease doesn't progress negatively, that's maintained. I think that's where my investment would be, but it would be scattered across cardiovascular, but equally, without obviously not being fair to, there's obviously neuro that's really important, orthopedics that's equally important, renal disease that's equally important, and disabling. So from that point of view, it would be across wider elements. But for me, because that's my big know-how, is cardiovascular.
Cool. And I'm glad to hear at the start you said that ideally you want to stay in the cardiovascular world. What's next for you then? What are you looking for? I know that you've not been in a rush to look. Are you looking for full-time, board, exec? What kind of opportunities are on the cards for you right now?
For me, you're absolutely right. It's not rush per se. It's about the right value that I can bring to the group. A group meaning the therapy area, preferably cardiovascular, to the board, to the patients, to the customers. Okay, that element is really important because it has to be a win-win. Okay, I'm open to all types of positions whereby people can maximize my value. Right, I've grew up in the corporate world. I know the corporate world very, very well. But equally, Jordan, for me, it's about giving back in terms of what I learned over the last 15 plus years, and equally supporting group of customers that I know very well and have the right intentions for the patients that are for today, but equally for tomorrow. So I hope I'm giving you a warm feeling that absolutely I could do. I've got multiple aspects to my profile, but I think the value needs to be maximized on both sides.
Cool. No, I like it very much so. And yeah, I think let's wrap it up today. And I think one of the things that I would like to ask before you go is, there's going to be a lot of commercial operators that will be watching this. There's going to be people that have seen your rise at Terumo. What's your last few pieces of advice that you would give to people early on in their career that are ready to, drive this rocket ship?
Sure. Commit 100%. Okay. Not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You need to be 100% committed. Okay. So commitment, driven. Okay. Reliable. Okay. These are all words that I'm using because, again, you need to implement them in practice. Okay. Trust. If you can do those elements, trust goes multiple ways. Trust your team, trust your manager, trust your customer, but equally they have to trust you. For me, if you're able to do those fueled by purpose, so you know why you come to work, as well as executing with that discipline on strategy, on actions, and following up, um, you're going to enjoy. And if you put a smile on your face, you can go anywhere.
So just keep smiling, right? Just keep smiling. Brilliant. Cool. Well, look, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting with you and speaking with you. I do look forward to seeing where your eventual next steps may go because I think you can add huge value to the market. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds for you, Tarik.
Jordan, thank you very much. I appreciate everything in terms of the Crux and Cardio and fantastic podcast as always, which I continue to follow. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks.
If there's one thing this space has taught me, both personally and professionally, it's that progress in cardiovascular care is never the result of one individual. It's built by ecosystems, by teams, by people willing to take the long bets on hard problems. At Crux, our mission is to support that ecosystem through talent, capital, and community. The podcast is one small part of that effort, a place to share the real stories from people shaping the future of cardiovascular care. If you found value in today's conversation, I would love for you to follow the show and share it with someone building in this space. And if you're a founder, operator, or investor working on something meaningful in the cardiovascular care space, we'd love to hear from you.